Good morning. Welcome to Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, and the fellowship. I am Pastor Mark Baze, and we have made it to Friday, and we are going to be answering some questions. We're going to be talking about a little bit of news with a certain kicker from the Kansas City Chiefs and all the trouble that he caused because he said basic things like men are men and women are women, and it's not good to kill babies. Also, we're going to be looking at an article from the Gospel Coalition talking about why pastors need to stay at least 5 years at their church. And I agree in part. I think pastors need to stay at their churches a lot longer. But probably as we look at some things, we're going to diverge some from what the Gospel Coalition has to say on the matter. But we're going to look at all those matters today. Thank you all for joining us. I thought we had a good time yesterday. We had a lot of questions, and I didn't even get to answer everything. But what a great crowd. Appreciate having everybody on. And looks like everybody is filing in. So glad to have all of you here today. Thank you all so very much. Now, with that, let's start out with a little bit of news today, and then I'm going to go into our Gospel Coalition, and then I'm going to save the question for the end. Seems like I always do the questions first, and then I run out of time to talk about the other things that I want to talk about. So we're going to try to do that today. And maybe I end up having to do just 2 days dedicated to answering questions during the week. Maybe we'll do like a Theology Tuesday, Theology Thursday, because we continue to get lots of questions, which is great. I'm glad. You can always submit your questions to me at markbazeministries.org. Let me show you right over here. Get the website pulled up there for you. And you'll see right here, you have Shields and Arrows. I've got right now, so whenever you click on Shields and Arrows, I need to fix this, but whenever you go to episodes 1 through 20, it actually just takes you to the Worshipify screen. And so Worshipify is embedded right there. You can go to see all episodes, and so there they all are right there. You want to watch some of the early days whenever our audio quality was terrible. You can do that, and our video quality was terrible. And also, going back to Mark Baze Ministries, you can find our articles, sermon notes. I'm going to be getting Jonah up there soon, so be on the lookout for that. Jonah will be up there. We're going to be doing session number 2, videoing session number 2 for you. And so I am excited about all those things. I think that's going to be a lot of fun, good study for us. And with that, also, if you click on About Our Ministry, I updated that page as well. I'm talking about, do you want to find serious Bible study? Do you want questions answered? Do you want to take the Bible literally, historically, grammatically, and contextually? And context is key in all those important matters. This will introduce you to our ministry, maybe just a little bit better, give you a better idea. So if you have any questions about the website, be sure to let me know. And okay, now really quickly before we get started here, normally I don't have my coffee with me, but I poured this cup of coffee because I was a little bit late and I didn't want it to go to waste. So I'm going to mute myself so you won't have to hear me slurping. But anybody recognize, well, no, you probably wouldn't. But my wife and I, we got this coffee mug on our honeymoon from Hacienda del Sol in Taos, New Mexico. Taos, New Mexico is one of our most favorite places. It's where I met Dr. White and his amazing family, and really made a big impact on my ministry. But it's a shame the old owners of this bed and breakfast, they don't own it anymore, and they've really kind of lost as good a breakfast and everything. So what a shame. But I still have the coffee mug to remember the good old days, and we'd stay there every time we would go out to Taos. And we hope to go out to Taos again sometime soon. We just have a bunch of children with us this time, so it'll make life, interesting. So once again, thank you so much for joining us here on Shields and Arrows. Now give me just 1 second, and we will get right into the questions here. But here we go. Let's do this. Okay, I finished up the coffee. It's gone now, so we can get started. I had to help get the kids ready today, so I was running out of time. Now, with that, first and foremost, over the week, there was a graduation commencement speech. As always, there are such things this time of year. And a certain NFL kicker spoke at a Catholic graduation. And I mean, he's because he's Catholic. So a Catholic college, from what I understand. And his name, like I said, he plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, but his name is, where's it at? Harrison Butker. And he basically really just kind of called out all of the progressive woke stuff. Now, what's amazing is to call out progressive woke stuff in today's time, it's really just saying factual things that nobody would have been offended by like 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. The idea of we shouldn't put kids on hormones that could greatly affect their maturing. We maybe shouldn't have abortions all the way up to the point of birth, or, the idea of even infanticide, killing the babies after they're born. Yes, we've had politicians even suggest that. Those are all wild, crazy positions that any sane person would be able to say, yeah, those are wild, insane, crazy positions. But the progressive movement has gone so far in recent years, if you get up and you say anything about that, you're considered somehow a radical traditionalist. And that's kind of what he's being painted as. Oh my goodness, he's this Catholic, he goes to a Latin Mass, which I'm not a Catholic. I don't think they have good theology. I think they've made a lot of mistakes in their understanding of the Bible because they didn't rightly divide it and know that the kingdom's for Israel and it's a completely separate matter than the body of Christ. And so they have all this kingdom authority ideology, apostolic succession, and supports abortion up to the point of birth, and the redefinition of marriage, and all of the crazy gender ideology that's going on today. He just simply called it out. I have a lot of respect for him on that. I can greatly appreciate him being willing to do so. And of course, the powers that be, such as the NFL, did not appreciate that very much. And you cannot help but notice the parallel, because you had another NFL player, a few years ago, protest on the NFL dime during the games, kneeling for the national anthem. And the NFL, they just kind of wanted to whistle past that whole matter. And yet, then you have this NFL kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, who, on his own time, he's not at a game. This is not affiliated with anything NFL related. He's just an employee of a NFL team. He's not allowed free speech because the NFL condemned him. We do not support this. He does not speak. It's time to boycott the NFL again. The Kaepernick boycott kind of worked because the NFL got really they got really patriotic during those years, because there was a whole bunch of athletes who were kneeling for the national anthem. A lot of people didn't like it because, after all, the NFL, think about the states where football is most popular. I mean, you've got Texas, you got Florida, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. You go up north, you got Michigan, Wisconsin. Even though Wisconsin's a pretty blue state, Michigan, it may go. Your primary audience are conservative people. So the NFL found out real quick, and they got really patriotic. Remember, they did Ragged Old Flag for like the 2000 doxed where he lives. I mean, that's where his family is. I mean, you are putting somebody in danger by doing things like that. That is just terrible, classless, tasteless. But the NFL, they better be careful, because if they want to try to pander to the progressives, then they're going to find out that really quickly that, the majority of their audience is still conservative. So good for that kicker, good for standing up for his beliefs. And it's amazing because every time a Christian, Catholic, or even just a somewhat traditional conservative person comes out and says, hey, according to the Bible, marriage is between a man and a woman. According to the Bible, or traditional values, it's good for women to be homemakers. That is fundamentally good for them to be mothers, to raise their children. It's good for there to be fathers in the home. A big part of his speech was, we need fathers. That's one of our biggest problems in society today, is we need dads. And once again, it's not like he's wearing the Kansas City Chiefs uniform speaking at an NFL game. He didn't hijack an interview. He didn't hijack a post-game press conference. He was at a Catholic university speaking about Catholic doctrine and Catholic principles. So, once again, the entire idea of the double standard, it's hilarious. Kaepernick can protest on the NFL's time, and they're not going to make a big fuss about it. Yep. I'm going to read Scott's comment. He said, the NFL kicker comes out and states the obvious. Any small look at the interwebs supports his contentions, but the screeching meanies scream their heads off. And that's what's so funny. The vast majority of people say, yeah, we need dads. We need dads. And mothers are going to agree. Women are going to agree. Yes, I am very thankful for my children. I would not trade my children for anything. The normal people just look at this and say, yeah, that's all correct. But it's the elites that are in their little social groups on the East and West Coast that want to lose their minds or buy into that ideology. We're going to find out. We're going to see how many people actually are ready for traditional values. So, with that, the kicker, I support him. He needs to get his doctrine right. Catholicism's confused on some areas, but at least he has the courage to speak out and stand for the truth on the matter. So good for him. Okay, now let's talk about this article that was on the Gospel Coalition. So here is the Gospel Coalition right here, and it says, new pastor, stay at your church longer than 5 years. Okay, stay at your church longer than 5 years. I will say that I like that. I agree. And I actually, and I say that as somebody that my first church I was at for only 2.5 years. That wasn't because we chose to leave. It's not that we wanted to leave. It's that my wife got a residency in Durant, so we had to leave. There was just no way I could go back and forth from Durant to Tulsa to continue to pastor my church at Liberty. So if we'd have been in Tulsa, if my wife would have got a residency in Tulsa, then I'd hope that I would have been there to this day, and I'd have been going on my nearly getting close to my 5th year there as their pastor. But I agree with this. The old school thought, at least for a lot of preachers, especially back when it was more feasible. Nowadays, the idea of being a full-time pastor of a church is such a lofty thing. I say that I strive to be full-time the best that I can. The reality is, by the letter, I'm not a full-time pastor, only in the sense of I'm not at the church every day. I don't keep office hours. As a matter of fact, my office needs a good cleaning because I don't actually use it for office stuff. I have some things in there, like my suit that I wear for weddings and funerals. But I'm not at the church every day. Now, what I do for kind of a living is mostly ministry related, in addition to what little I do for my father-in-law on his ranch and managing his cattle and taking care of equipment, things like that. But used to, the idea of a full-time pastor was a lot more feasible. You could kind of do it, because kind of like I talked about in my small church video, you could move to Nowheresville, America, and find a church, a congregation of 100 people, and because the SBC and or whatever other church association, congregation, denomination was really good about preaching tithes, you had a pretty good budget at those little churches. And so they could afford to pay a full-time pastor, and there was a parsonage there, so you didn't have to pay for a house. You had all that paid for, so you could have a pretty decent living as a full-time preacher at the church. And because of that, there was a lot more competition. It was a lot more feasible. Nowadays, the idea of being a pastor, for most people it is bivocational. And I would say even for myself, it is, probably if I looked at the technicality of it, I am bivocational because I'm doing this. And even though this helps my ministry, it helps my church, my ministry is its own thing. That's one reason why I don't really advertise my ministry at my church, because for one, the church is bigger than a man, and I don't want the church to go down if I go down. I want the church to be protected that way. So, and I realize you've been looking at a small screen. So there's that. But with that being said, the idea once upon a time was you could kind of climb that ladder. You could move up to the next church and move up to the next church and the next one. And eventually you could pastor First Baptist Big Town, make even better money, and you'd have a secretary and all of those things. And to this day, you can still somewhat do that. It's a lot more difficult. And believe it or not, whenever I was a young man, my wife and I visited a church, a Baptist church in Tulsa, and I met the pastor there. And we kind of thought about going there, but it was a smaller church, and at the time I thought, no, we want a church that has people our age, because it was just an older congregation, and I wasn't looking at pastoring yet. So we ended up going to a little bit of a bigger church that had some couples our age, which to be said, and there's something to be said for having a church that has couples your age. And even honestly, by most people's standards, the church we went to would not be considered a big church. So with that, a few years later, when I was pastoring at Liberty then, I ran into that pastor from the church we visited. And he asked me what I was doing. I told him I was pastoring bivocationally at this church in Liberty. And he said, I need to get you in contact with the people I know. He said, I can get you out there on the golf course with the First Baptist preacher of Jinx, First Baptist preacher of Bixby, those big churches. They can get you in on some of the bigger ones. And because if you just stay at that little cow pasture church, you're going to stay a little cow pasture church preacher your entire life. And even then, I thought, what's wrong with that? I really will say, partly because I've had good mentorship from whether it's my father or mentors, Dr. White's talked about the importance of small churches. When I started ministry, I was committed to, I'm going to serve whatever church I'm at. And I just want to take that church and make it the best that I can, and I will be there as long as I can. So with that really is my mentality. I'm not looking at trying to climb the ladder. Now, the Gospel Coalition here, whenever we look at this article, it just seems to me like they have in mind new pastors, stay at your church longer than 5 years, because the idea is, well, eventually you're going to want to upgrade, right? Or, wait, not upgrade. The Lord will call you somewhere else, right? The Lord is going to call you somewhere. It just so happens to be a bigger church with more money, but you were called. God told you, and you're just being obedient to the calling of the Lord. So, with that, you need to stay at your church for just a little while, new pastors. So if you're a pastor stepping into a new church, it's prudent to commit to patiently stay for at least 5 years. I don't know. I think that, I'm agreeing with what they're saying, that you need to stay at the church for a little while. But the idea of, well, once you make it to 5 years, then you can, start looking at greener pastures, or God may give you a different calling. I guess the Gospel Coalition may know that God is not giving callings to go to other churches until after the 5-year mark. I'm kind of picking on them. Once again, I agree with what they're saying, but it's just the idea, once again, kind of the jumping around, trying to climb the ladder, get to the next bigger church, pastor a bigger congregation, things like that. Earning trust from a congregation can take longer, and admittedly, there are countless factors to consider. There are unique situations I may counsel differently, but in general, I don't believe a pastor's initial commitment to a church should be less than half decade. So this is important, the idea of staying at a church for a while. Now, obviously, those of you that are in my congregation, my audience, and some of you are in my congregation that are in our audience, you know that that most churches, if we're being honest, don't get the Bible right. They have a lot of confusion when it comes to their doctrine. They don't understand rightly dividing the Bible. They will apply things to themselves that shouldn't be. And so there is a lot of confusion. So I get all that, and you may want to say there's a lot of problem with preachers, but let me just talk about my idea, because once again, I don't want to see the church go away. And I want to see there be healthy churches. I think those things are good. Now, we can argue that house churches are the biblical type of church. Maybe so, but maybe not. I don't see in the scriptures where we would have to argue and say, no, nowhere ever in history, or especially in the Bible, the New Testament, Paul preaching the gospel, no time did they ever build a special building just for meeting. How realistic is that? What if it starts out at a house church and you can fit 10 people in that house comfortably? And as time goes on, you get more people coming. Hey, let's build this new house, and I'm going to live here, and I'm going to take care of it, but it's going to be bigger for people to come to. Okay, maybe it's still a house, but you did build it so more people could come. Maybe you have a more wealthier Christian and says, I'm going to expand my home, make it bigger to where people can come and stay. At what point do you start dividing that line? So we can talk about, we don't need churches, we just need house churches. I understand the argument, and there's people here that go to house churches, and they're great Bible students. However, I think that if we look at the reality, Christians pulling their resources together to build a church building to where people can congregate, that's okay. And it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. And those churches need pastors. So even though these pastors may have their theology wrong, maybe the longer they're there, the longer they study the Bible, the more likely they'll come upon sound doctrine. I think about Dr. White's story. He got to a big church, and he pastored there for a good while. And during that time that he was there, he started really studying the Bible more closely, more seriously, and then came upon better doctrine, understanding dispensational changes, understanding rightly dividing the Bible. So I think it's good for a preacher to stay in one place and not worry about jumping around church to church, trying to build a big congregation and move on. And I think that's kind of what the heart maybe of some of what the Gospel Coalition's getting at here. I don't agree with them on a lot of things. And maybe also they're saying don't get discouraged. I think that's probably true too. As we look, and they're going to talk about some things. Sorry, there's our live stream feed. Let me go to our... So... it says it takes time for a congregation to adapt to you as their pastor. That's true. So number one, it says time for the congregation to mourn and adapt. Even a healthy church will need time to mourn the loss of their previous pastor and adapt to you as their new pastor. After all, you're different from their last pastor. You have a unique personality and unique gifting for ministry. Okay, there's a little bit of evangeli stuff right there. Unique gifting for ministry. some preachers may be better at stuff than others. There may be some preachers that are really good at speaking, some that are all those. To be the preacher here. And that's true. It talks about in the article right here. It says many churches have gone through a phase of where the pastors are there for just a little while. So they don't want to get too committed to you. They don't want to get too attached to you. There's probably a fear that they have that, well, I don't want to get too attached to this preacher because he's just going to be gone. And it's hard to get any kind of ministry done if they think, oh, he's just going to leave us. So I think there's a lot of value in that. What they're saying here, Gospel Coalition, they don't have everything right, but a broken clock can be right once in a while, right? Twice a day. So that's very possible as well. So you do need to show them that you will be there for a while to invest in them. And I think that most pastors would agree that you're not going to make your biggest strides in progress until after a number of those years. There's still a lot of newness. You may notice a spike in people coming to church whenever you're the new pastor, just because people are going to want to get an idea of, okay, what's the new pastor like? And then, all right, he's a preacher. He preaches the Bible, or he's got his own personality. Now we're going to go back to normal. But you will, once you show commitment, people like consistency, they will start attending the church. Maybe there's people that they kind of come off and on for a long time, but once they see that you're there, you're consistent, you're committed, then you finally can win them over. Sometimes it takes people a while to get used to that. They need to see your persistence, your consistency. Time for you to demonstrate faithful perseverance. I think there's some truth to that. I think that, it's good for them to see you demonstrate that you're capable, that you're competent. Everything's great the first year as a preacher. That's one of the things I've really kind of noticed. I'm still kind of in my first year. Everything's fine right now. At some point, you're going to run into some headaches, just like a family may. Families are going to have headaches. Families are going to have difficulties. So you may run into some of that. And they need to see how you handle it. Are you going to be able to take the difficulties? Are you going to be able to take the challenges? And once you can show some good, solid consistency, some competence, people want to be confident. They want to be able to trust you in not only your ability to teach the Bible, but also other areas. Can you do a good job as a leader in general? Can you handle issues that the church has to deal with? Are you mature enough to be able to address those problems? And I think that's probably true as a young man especially. A young man does need a lot of trial because he isn't proven. So this idea, this principle of being able to show that, loving them is important. I think that comes along pretty quickly, at least for me. I really like the people at my church. I love the people at my old church. I look back on Liberty with the fondest of memories. And one of the things that I struggled with was, am I going to be able to connect with the people at Blue like I did at Liberty? Because, I love the people at Liberty. They're great people, and I miss them, and I still talk to them ever so often, and they're doing well, and that just makes me so happy to hear. But I've come to build strong connections and bonds with the people at Blue as well. It's not the same. They haven't replaced Liberty, but I still have a bond and love them and am excited to be their pastor. And it's just different. There will be a bond that I have with Blue that I don't have with Liberty. So you just adjust. It's a part of life and getting adjusted to all that. Time for you to rest in God's grace. I don't know where they want to go with that. When we're humble servants who rest in God's grace, we show His people we're fighting the good fight of faith alongside them. I think maybe they wanted to have 4 points. They're maybe almost reiterating some of what they said. And so I do think that this is a good point. We need a reshaping of how we approach pastors at churches, that, like the title says, pastors need to build up their church, not their resume. Notice I said build up. I didn't say grow the church. I didn't say build the church. I just said build up the church. And I do think that there's an important difference. There's many people that, like on the small church video, they said, if the church isn't growing, that's a bad sign. It means you're doing something wrong. Any healthy church, any good church is going to grow. I don't think that's necessarily true. They build that off of Acts chapter 2. They'll say, look, was added unto them 3,000 souls. The Holy Spirit was moving and working. If your church ain't growing, the Holy Spirit ain't working, and your church is dead, and probably needs to shut down. It's kind of how some people approach it. I would say a pastor, if he goes to that church, and that church has a congregation of 40 people, counting every single man, woman, boy, girl, and dog. He stays at that church and serves them for 15 years. And he leaves that church and there's 40 people there, man, woman, boy, girl, and dogs. If he left that church and that church came away with a better understanding of the Bible, more sound doctrine, growing in their knowledge of what the Word of God says, that preacher should not hang his head. And he can look back on his days, and that is a time well spent. Now, that doesn't mean that the church should want to be this exclusive club that nobody else enters into, but to make the numbers on a board the most important thing is to miss the point. Because there's a lot of churches that have big numbers. There's a lot of churches that pack I started to say pews, but they don't have pews, they have seats. There's a lot of churches that pack the seats. But what are they actually growing? What are they actually learning? What are they doing to increase in their knowledge of the Bible? So, we've got to completely rethink this. Normally, traditionally, kind of the format was you go to the church of the 40, you increase it to 80. Then the church of 100 hires you, and you grow them to 200. Then the church of 300 hires you, and you grow them up to 500. The church of 750 hired you to get them up to 1,000 or so, and you just keep climbing the ladder until, after being in ministry for about 25 years, you're a 45, 50-year-old man, and now you're the pastor of First Baptist Big Church, and you're set. The traditional format is if you don't have a good resume, then you're doing something wrong. Every church you're at, you should be able to point to, I did this many baptisms, these many families joined, the number of church membership was this before I joined, or before I became their pastor, this is the church membership after I became their pastor. And then eventually maybe you work yourself up to where you're in the association as a DOM or something, and you are in charge of all these churches, and it almost becomes a denominational Episcopal type format with some of the associations. I'm talking about Baptist here because that's just what I'm familiar with. I just want us to completely rethink that. And I think the Gospel Coalition's on to something. I think they're missing some important points. I still think that whenever I read that article, they have a little bit of that, build the church, and then you can go after 5 years. It's okay if you leave after 5, just don't leave before that. I think there's been a lot of people do the stair step, climb the ladder. I think there's been a lot. Everybody talks about, there was that preacher. He grew up in that little town of 50 people. And he became a preacher, of that little town's church, and then he moved up to the big town, and then he got even bigger and went to the city. And my goodness, now he pastors First Baptist, big town, Oklahoma, or Texas, or Georgia, fill in the blank, whatever city, state you want to think of. And he just started out in that little old town, that little old country boy. And look at him now. He's the big preacher wearing the fancy suit at the big church. Multiple services a day. And we think that guy right there, that's impressive. We've had a ton of people do that. What about trying to do something like this? You're a pastor. You're a preacher. You find a church. That church has however many people, whatever number it is, 20, 40, 80, 100, and you become their pastor. And you pastor that church as long as they let you. 10, 15, 20, 30 years. A lot of people today think, oh, that's not good. You shouldn't have a preacher be the preacher for that long. You got to get somebody fresh in there. As long as the church wants sound doctrine and you're teaching the Bible, why leave? How about this? Instead of hopping and jumping, while you're pastoring that church, you bring up young men and you train them. And they go out to other churches. And furthermore, guess what? You don't do this whole associate pastor, teaching pastor, elder pastor, whatever other pastor names that you want to come up with. You're the pastor. You're the preacher. And you stop hogging all the men. And you have them go out to their own churches. So instead of having 5 pastors that are serving your big church because you keep growing it up, how about you take the young man who shows a lot of promise, you raise him up, you train him up to teach the Bible, and then you send him on and you say, son, listen, there's a small church congregation of 20 people. They live 10 miles from here. You need to go be their preacher. You need to teach them the Bible, and you need to serve them as long as you can. Some may say, well, I don't know. I have some people that live over that way. They like that young man. They may start going to church over there to support him. Praise the Lord. That's a good thing. That's fine. It's a more local church, and if he's teaching the Bible, let him go over there. Let him build that church. Then in a few years, you raise up another young man, and there's a little old church over there. They got a congregation of 30. How about that? They need a preacher. We've raised you up. We've trained you up. Go be their preacher. I think that's way better. I think that's much more beneficial. Instead, oh, we've got a great young man right here. Oh, we're going to take him on. He's going to be our assistant pastor. He's going to teach on Sunday nights because I don't want to teach on Sunday nights. He's going to do all this. And we're just going to keep building, bigger. And we're going to have all these different pastors, all these different preachers. I'm just not convinced that that's the way to go. Everybody, so many people commented on that video, well, what are you going to do when your church gets bigger? Maybe it does. But if I'm not raising up a young pastor in my church, in the next 10 years, if I don't have somebody that's apt to teach in my church, a young man or a man my age or a little bit older who's apt to teach, and he can at least teach a Sunday school class for my church, or even grow up and go somewhere else on his own, or has ambitions to do so, I don't know, I may need to reassess what's going on. Because there are younger men in my church. I want to be training them to where they can teach. So maybe that's really how that's supposed to go. I think that the church will limit itself as it tries to minister to other churches. As you start training up young men, you'll be sending them out. And you'll be able to send them to other churches, and other churches will benefit from it. So that's my thoughts on the matter. anybody can, anybody. A motivated individual can climb the ladder of success in the church hierarchy. But what the real test is can you go to a church and can you faithfully serve that church for decades? Can you build that church up? Can you produce leaders out of that church? Teachers? Because I want to kind of want to take over the world. And, maybe not be the dictator, but I kind of want to take over, right? I want to be able to raise up young men and send them over to the surrounding areas and create a movement in Southeast Oklahoma, Northeast Texas, of rightly dividing churches. How else? What's the best way to do it? How else are you going to do it? Are we just going to continue to always be, oh, here's one over here in this state, here's one in this state, there's a house church over here, there's a house church over there, there's one big one over here that a lot of people go to. That's fine, but it's scattered. And think about what happens. If I can commit to a church, and then these other preachers who teach the Bible rightly divided can commit to a church and train up young men, we can just start slowly spreading. And we can have, because then that kid that I sent 10 miles to the east, he trains up somebody in the next couple of years and is able to send them to the next church that's a few miles to the east. And we just keep on going till we get to the Atlantic, and then we go to the Pacific, and we go down to Mexico. We go up north, and we get to Canada. And then before you know it, you can go to every state and you can find a church that is teaching the Bible rightly divided. And if you just try to build up a church for a few years then leave, you're not going to be able to give that church a good doctrine, because I want my church. Here's what I want. Whenever I'm gone, and I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. I want to be there for as long as I can, because there's a lot that I need to accomplish. If something was to happen to me, that's more the scenario I think of. Like something happens to me, like I kick the bucket. I say to that guy, "What are you going to do? Stab me?" And he stabs me, right? Something happens to me. I don't want my work to just be wiped away and done. I want that church to continue in sound doctrine after I'm gone. You can't do that if you're only at a church for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years even. But if you're at that church and you teach them and train them up over the course of a decade or more, when you're gone, there should be somebody there at that church, if necessary, to fill your shoes, to take your place. So I would encourage churches, you truly, truly need to have a pastor that's committed to being there for a good long while. That's what I'm committed to at Blue. All right. So I know some of you may be looking for a pastor. Just come over to Blue. I'm going to be there for a while. So come on down to Durant, Oklahoma. Land is expensive, but it's expensive everywhere. And if everybody's moving here anyways, I just assume it'd be right dividers. So come over here, be a member of my church. I'll be here for a good long time. And a lot of you are a little bit older than me, so, hopefully you don't have to worry about me not living very long. Maybe old age won't catch me, but wrecking a dirt bike might. That could happen. And I'll be riding here in a few weeks. I'm excited about that. Okay, so there's my thoughts on the churches, why they need to stick around. And we need to train up pastors in the churches themselves to go out to the next church. And that will... The church that wants to keep everybody and hog everybody, that's how you stay big, I suppose. But if you start sending people out, then you'll branch out and you'll have hopefully some good sound doctrine. So that's my thoughts. So come to Blue. Come to Blue, Oklahoma. I'll be your preacher for a good long time. Now, let's talk about a question that was sent in to me by a person on YouTube. I don't know if he's Russian. I don't know what his name is, but I'm going to try to read it. Aldmitriv 3780. YouTube names are funny. He commented on a video on my short that I was talking about we need to decide what to do with Paul. Because either Paul was a liar or he received new revelation from God. Because Paul said, I got a mystery. It was hidden in previous ages. It was not made known to the sons of men. And now you can be saved by grace through faith, not of works, lest anyone should boast. Either Paul was lying about that, and we could always be saved for all time by grace through faith, not of works. Or that there was salvation being offered for all time. Or Paul really did have new revelation. So he responds here, and I appreciate him asking the question. He says, no disrespect, brother, but can you please clarify your stance on the Old Testament saints? Do you believe that they were saved somehow, but not by the believing in the future grace of Christ? Thank you so much for asking this question. It's a really important question. Short answer is, no, I don't think they were saved by believing in the future grace of Christ. I will say this. I will go so far to say that I do not think Moses was saved. I don't think David was saved. I don't think Joshua was saved. I don't think Solomon was saved. I don't think Abraham was saved. And everybody will say, what? I think that you do not get to build the case that you could just be saved by grace through faith, not of works, lest anyone should boast, going all the way back into the Old Testament. There are too many times that you see a requirement to offer a sacrifice. For example, if we go to the Old Testament, Leviticus chapter 4. And the Lord said, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a soul shall sin through ignorance against any of the commandments of the Lord concerning things which ought not to be done, and shall do against any of them. So this chapter here is known as the sin offering. It's going to be the bullock that's offered. But if a soul shall sin through ignorance against any of the commandments, that's important right there. Mind that phrase. It's a sin through ignorance, not knowing they were going against the commandments. If you can search Leviticus, if you sinned intentionally, you would not have it. There was not a sacrifice available for you. If the priest that is anointed do sin according to the sin of the people, then let him bring forth his sin which he hath sinned, a young bullock without blemish unto the Lord for a sin offering. And he shall bring the bullock unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord, and shall lay his hand upon the bullock's head, and kill the bullock before the Lord. And the priest that is anointed shall take of the bullock's blood, and bring it to the tabernacle of the congregation. You can read all this, all the instruction that is to be done. The kidneys, the fat, the liver, burning it on the altar. If the whole congregation of Israel sin through ignorance, this is all in the context of sinning through ignorance, not a willful sin, but only sinning through ignorance. And when that sin is known, so when they realize they offer the young bullock, and they lay their hands upon the head of the bullock before the Lord. And then verse 20. And he shall do with the bullock as he did with the bullock for a sin offering, and he shall do with this, and the priest shall make an atonement for them, and it shall be forgiven them. Those who want to say we have always been saved for all time by grace through faith in the completed work of Christ, they have several big problems that they are going to have to deal with. It says the priest shall make an atonement for them. You can go down the rabbit hole as far as you want and say, priest there, this right here, that's actually Jesus. That priest is Jesus. He's the one making an atonement for them. No. If words mean anything, that word priest cannot be Jesus. It's talking about the priests. And the priest that is anointing shall bring of the bullock's blood to the tabernacle, and the priest shall dip his finger in some of the blood. You cannot do that. You can't start trying to get cutesy with the Bible and make claims. This is all about Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Read Jesus into every single passage, every single verse. And the priest shall make an atonement for them. An atonement. There it is. The priest made the atonement. And it shall be forgiven them. There is not a single Jewish rabbi in history that has ever taught that the blood of that bull did not offer an atonement for them, that the sin offering did not offer atonement and forgiveness. You had to do that. You could not just say, oh, I believe in the Lord Jesus and I'll be saved, because it was not known. When a ruler hath sinned and done somewhat through ignorance, not every sin could be forgiven. It's ignorance. There's a lot of ignorance today in a lot of preachers concerning things which should not be done and is guilty. And when he sins, comes to his knowledge. So once you realize that you sinned, obviously if you did it through ignorance, you wouldn't realize you were sinning at the time. Then you bring a goat, a male without blemish. Lay his hand upon the head of the goat, kill it. And he shall burn all his fat upon the altar, and as the fat of the sacrifice of peace offerings. And the priest shall make an atonement for him concerning his sin, and it shall be forgiven him. There's those that are going to say, it was always Jesus behind the scenes the whole time being the actual source. Because they have this hang-up, and they say, the blood of bulls and goats cannot take away sin. They'll quote Hebrews chapter 10 over and over. The blood of bulls and goats cannot take away sin. And if any of the common people sin through ignorance, this is where you can quote Hebrews chapter 10 if you want to, and you can start trying to make your claims that the blood of the bulls and goats never did anything. You honestly, what you do then is you make God have them kill all those bulls and goats for nothing because it didn't matter, because it didn't do anything for them. But you can say that they didn't take away any of the sin. The issue is, how are you going to get around some sins could be forgiven and others could not? If we go to Leviticus chapter 20, think about the words that you're going to see here. And the soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits and after wizards to go whoring after them, I will even set my face against that soul and will cut him off from among his people. I mean, where's the forgiveness in that? Do you see anywhere that you get forgiveness? I will cut him off. I will set my face against that soul. Does that sound like mercy, grace, forgiveness? I don't see a sacrifice mentioned. It doesn't say, and the soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits and after wizards, they shall bring their bull to the priest, and the priest shall make an offering for them, and he shall receive atonement and it be forgiven of him. No, you're cut off. You don't get forgiveness for that sin because you did it intentionally. Sanctify yourselves, therefore, and be ye holy. I am the Lord your God. And ye shall keep my statutes and do them. I am the Lord which sanctify you. Now you can start trying to do all the verbal gymnastics. See, it's God that's sanctifying. It's Jesus all behind the scenes. Sure, just ignore everything else. For everyone that curseth his father or mother shall offer the bull on the altar for a sin offering. No. His blood shall be upon him. He shall surely be put to death. Where's the offering there? Where's the forgiveness? There's not a forgiveness of sins in that. You can try to read between the lines, put on your special goggles that let you read Jesus into every verse. Forgiveness of sins is not in that verse. And to try to claim otherwise, you're adding things into the Bible. And the man that committeth adultery with another man's wife, put to death. Right there. No sin offering, no forgiveness, no atonement, put to death. All these other very nice things that you can read about. Just get ready. That one's coming to California soon. Look at these. Put to death. They shall die. Ye shall not walk in the manners of the nations which I cast out before you, for they committed all these things, and therefore I abhor them. But I said unto you, ye shall inherit their land, and I will give it unto you to possess it, a land that floweth with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God. You shall be holy unto me, for I the Lord am holy, and have severed you from the people, that ye should be mine. And then once again, a man or also a woman that hath a familiar spirit, or that is a wizard, shall surely be put to death. They shall stone them with stones, their blood shall be upon them. So you can, once again, you can jump to Hebrews chapter 10 and you can cite your verse all you want. But what are you going to do with Leviticus? I think that today are not good students of the Old Testament. The law having a shadow. Good things to think about that. I want to say that the good things were then and now. By grace through faith, not of works, praise God. No. The law having a shadow of good things to come. Those things were not there yet. It was not the very image of the things, and can never, with those sacrifices, continually make the comers thereunto perfect. What you have to do is you have to know where you're going to go with this. If you say, make the comers thereunto perfect, if you interpret that as the sacrifice, if you interpret that as the sacrifice man being Jesus Christ is preached unto you the forgiveness of sins, and by him all that believe are justified from all things, from which ye could not be justified by the law of Moses. The law of Moses was limited. It couldn't take care of every sin. It was only able to take care of the certain sins that were done by ignorance, the ones that had a sacrifice that could atone for them. So the idea, going back to your question there, and it's a great question. I appreciate you listening. I hope you are watching. I hope that you get to see this here. But there was not a salvation as you and I know it. You had to be obedient, and then you looked forward to a day of future resurrection, and you would be judged according to your works, and if you were obedient to God, then you would be able to enter into that kingdom when it came. And that's so tough because people want to say, no, there's no way. There's no way. There's only ever been one gospel. We did not know that Christ was going to die on the cross for the sins of the world. We did not know it. Now, there are some right dividers in this camp that do want to say Christ retroactively takes care of all those sins because the blood of bulls and goats can't. You have issues there because you're going to see sacrifices resume one day. You're going to see the need to continue to ask for forgiveness of sins, like with John writing to the Jewish people. There's some inconsistencies there. I can understand what they're trying to say, but you cannot say that you had no obligations to follow the law, keep the commandments, offer the sacrifices. Otherwise, you're just going to be flying in the face of the Bible. All right, we've had bad internet connections today. I apologize. I'm going to upload this full video for you, and it'll be available for you to watch. But this has been Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, and the fellowship. I'm excited. We're going to be having session number 2 of Jonah during Sunday school on Sunday. We're also going to be having a special one-off sermon before we get into a new sermon series on Sunday mornings. Until next time, this has been Shields and Arrows, and thank you for watching. I'm Pastor Mark Baze. You can find my material at markbazeministries.org under Support Our Ministry. So continue to stand for truth, defend your faith, defend the families. We'll see you tomorrow, Sunday.